As Europe faces an aging population and severe worker shortages, African economies struggle to create jobs for their youthful populations. Migration from Africa to Europe is a pressing reality, with 2023 seeing increased anti-immigration sentiment and policies aimed at curbing irregular migration. The UK government's controversial plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda and European politicians' attempts to negotiate repatriation deals with African governments highlight the complex issues at play. However, these efforts overlook the benefits of migration, such as skill transfer and remittance payment, and they fail to address brain drain concerns. Ghana's health sector exemplifies this challenge. In 2022, 4,000 Ghanaian nurses emigrated despite the country's severe medical staff shortages. The UK government proposed recruitment deal offering £1,000 per nurse sparked outrage. How can we find a win-win solution that, amongst other things, includes strengthened legal migration pathways? To explore the complexities of Africa-Europe migration and potential solutions, we're joined now by Dr. Cristiano D'Orsi, a senior researcher and lecturer. He joins us from Johannesburg, South Africa. It's good to see you again, Doctor. Thanks for giving us your time.
Thank you so much, Felicity. It's always a pleasure to be here with you and discuss these very timely topics.
We are at a crisis level, aren't we, Doctor? What are the key factors that is driving this migration from Africa to Europe?
Well, Felicity, as we also discussed previously, I mean, in other occasions that I could intervene in your show. Africa, we still have limited economic opportunity. It's still a continent with a lot of unrest and conflict. We sometimes face repressive government. We don't have to underestimate also the fact that there is a growing percentage of youth population that it doesn't see a bright future in the continent. And last but not last, we can also consider the climate change actually that push more Africans to move from their country or region of origin. These are basically the key factors driving migration from Africa to Africa, but also, of course, from Africa to Europe, yes.
We've had increasing efforts to curb migration across board in Europe particularly. How do you think some of these policies aimed at curbing irregular migration is impacting African economies?
Well, I mean, of course, this is impacting African economies because, first of all, these people, the Africans, they are trying to seek, to seek a better life in Europe. But if they, even if the European countries, the European Union, or even countries that are not parties to the European Union, trying to adopt policies in order to curb this migration, it doesn't prevent Africans who have decided to leave the continent to leave the continent. And this is something on which we should all reflect, because no matter can be harsh these policies, we don't see any decrease of the flow of a wave of migrants from Africa to Europe. Some senior colleague once told me that when you have nothing and you don't see nothing in your future, nothing can prevent you to try to look for something elsewhere. So maybe it's this that young generation, above all young generation, they don't see any future, And no matter what European government decide to do, this in any case do not prevent them to try to cross the shore of Mediterranean, actually. And of course, this is something that is impacting African economies because they are losing a lot of young manpower, so of course.
You and I discussed the UK Rwanda deportation
Sure.
when it was the rave of the moment at the time. And we've also had conversations about it as the plans have revised over time. This is controversial as well as other plans that are being put forward. Is it time that African leaders need to begin to reevaluate what would be the implication that African governments must consider going forward as it impacts the continent?
Oh, well, yes, yes, Felicity. Of course they should, because in any case, we are talking about the future of the continent, and economics is possibly the most important part for uh, foresee a better future for the entire continent. So of course, I mean the leaders, but they're also doing that in the sense that there are what I mean, there are different ways of trying to use, the domestic, to try to take Africans back, or to use African in order that they can be more useful for the economy of their own country. And I remember there was an ILO paper that was published one time ago that was talking about the 6R, actually. I mean, how African can use, the manpower, and there were different solutions, such as, for example, the return of the migrants to their country of origin, or to restrict the international mobility of own nationals and foreign workers. The word also, there was African were even thinking to recruit international migrants, where for international migrants means mostly other African migrants. There was also a sort of reparation for loss of human capital, or also to try, the option they were given by diaspora, so the so-called resourcing expatriate, um, or even the retention of the migrants, I mean, through educational sector policy and through economic development. Of course, there's been different kind of solutions that should be discussed, and not all of them maybe they're applicable, or they can be applicable. But for example, with the adoption, because now there is this important, how we can say, it's the more important effect of the mobility in Africa, because now it's believed that make opening the border, it allows migrants, to also to travel better, to go from a place to another where there is more need. And if this at the moment at the continental level is not very well developed, we have the protocol on mobility in Africa, but until that was adopted in 2018, but until now it's been ratified only by 4 countries. But this can be done more at the sub-regional level. I mean, you are talking from Nigeria, and in ECOWAS, for example, we have this very old, it dates back to 1979, protocol for freedom of movement of people in the ECOWAS area. And this, for example, also facilitate the flow of migrants from a country to another, and to try, to compensate the gap in manpower in several countries of ECOWAS. And the same also can be done, it's been done in East Africa. So, there are different ideas and there are different ways. I mean, before it was, of course, what is important for Europeans at the moment, unfortunately, I mean, their policy is mostly tend to securitization of Europe. So what European they don't want at the moment is they are Africans. I mean, they want to keep Africans in Africa. But we have to
But they do
understand, in
have
my opinion,
needs.
that
I mean, some of the best
yes,
doctors across Europe are from Africa.
yes,
Some of the best engineers are from Africa. Some of the best brains are from Africa. So as much as they
sure.
might not want it, it is a reality. I guess I want you to move on and maybe explore the strengthening of legal migration pathways as one way of addressing the current crisis. I think this is your thought.
No, yes, I mean, but I mean, of course, what you said is correct. But we are talking, which category of migrants we are dealing with. What you mentioned, engineers, doctors, some of the best minds, African minds, of course, but most of them, they arrived uh, in Europe as students. So they were educated there, and of course they could develop, and of course European countries, they're not that stupid to, to educate foreigners, to educate good mind, and to let them go. So of course they retain those ones. But on the other side, that this is a minority. We are mostly talking in this last years of skilled laborers, or even Africans who have been educated at home. But that unfortunately, uh, for different reasons, the degree that has been gained in many countries in Africa, they are not really very well considered in Europe. So if someone who is an engineer or studied in a given African country and think that he can go to the UK and to become to work as an engineer just with the degree that was gained in his home country in Africa, this is unfortunately not the reality. So we have, and it's very difficult at the moment, to harmonize the degrees, the African degrees to the European degrees.
Okay, there's a part of the
But of
question that you
course,
are yet to address, and that is, improving our legal pathway as one way to curb illegal migration.
well, I mean, to curb illegal migration, it's a uh, how can in from the African side, it's there are these policies of externalizing migration and also asylum that Europe is doing the more and more, and the attempt of the Rwanda plan was an example, but there are more practical and less, of course, a dramatic example of externalization, policy externalization. The problem that this kind of policy have been widely criticized in Africa, in the sense that they according to many African scholars and practitioners, this policy of externalization policy of migration, it does do the interest of Europeans. They are even, I mean, they're even, okay, maybe they're too radical as vision, but there are even authors, African authors, that they think that this externalization policy in reality is just the continuation of a form of colonization. So they've been, it's very difficult. Your initial question is very interesting because how we can, you know, change the entire situation in order that migration can be a win-win policy. Well, it's already I mean, in my opinion, it's already win-win at the moment because in many countries in Europe, you have African migrants who are working or are supporting the economy of those countries. So even if there are some political movement that they don't want to
Doctor,
recognize,
that your
yes,
win-win analogy might get you in trouble because some persons will tell you, how is it a win-win in real terms? I mean, African governments are losing in mass numbers young people, whether they're raised abroad or not, their roots also remain,
but
yeah.
yeah, yes, Felicity. But at the moment, what many African governments they can offer concretely to these young people, they can offer. I mean, they can offer a future. They can offer a, a you know, a well remunerated job. I mean that's one question that we have to wonder. Yes, it's true. Many African countries they are losing young manpower, but this young manpower is composed by smart guys,
Yeah, so
and
I think that also begs the question, what are African leaders learning from what is going on in other climes? Because if these places are not favorable, people will not be migrating en masse to go and find better opportunities there. So what are some of the key things that you think African governments, African leaders can begin to look at as a way to improve on maybe on employment opportunities and better education for young people?
Well, I mean, apart that, we saw in the last decades improvements, and of course the level of education and job opportunities in I don't want to say in all the African countries, but at least in several African countries. I mean, we can perceive the change, and the only fact that the most part of African migrants, they in fact remain in Africa, and they don't even try to cross the shore of the Mediterranean, means that in a way or in another, Africans, they still believe they can do something positive in Africa. This said, of course, the problems are still are more or less still a bit the same. That we are wondering for decades why, for example, African countries they cannot manage to use the immense the vast rich I mean wealth that they have through the raw material that they are on the African soil, and they could allow to many African countries to flourish much more than they were doing. Why this is not be done is not done yet, for example. I mean, because of course, if African countries could have the right to exploit and to trade, to have a fair trade condition of trade of the raw materials, the import-export balance, right? Why this it cannot be done in a fair way? Why, if African countries they are potentially very rich, but they undergo often condition of trade that are unfair to them. These are, of course, I'm not an expert of trade. I'm not an expert of investment law, but these are questions that
They need to ask.
should be analyze, because there are also the many investments that they've been doing in these last decades by foreign countries are really in which percentage are benefiting African countries, and in which percentage they are benefiting the country who are investing. This is also another question that should be very interesting to respond at, because you can see that there are huge investment, and I'm sure there are African countries that are benefiting uh, of them, but in which percentage? If we are still witnessing a migration crisis. That's the problem, because this is a bit dichotomic, right? I mean, when you say you start saying that there is a migration crisis, but on the other side, we read that investment in Africa, they are growing and growing and growing.
Yeah,
So why there is a migration crisis if there are investment they have been doing on the continent? So maybe this investment, maybe they are not so advantageous for African countries. I don't know. I'm wondering myself as well. I don't have an answer for that. But you always have this kind of dichotomic situation. I mean, governments, they can continue. I mean, they try. As I said, on one side they try to open the border, and some countries has done it, but the most part of them they didn't do it yet. Why they didn't do it? There is
it is indeed
economic,
a
there are
complex.
some external pressure. I don't know. Yes, please.
Migration is indeed a complex discourse anytime you pick it up. You don't even
Yeah,
know where to
yeah,
handle it from.
it
We'll
is.
just pause for today. I'm sure we'll have this conversation plenty more times in the future. Doctor, I want to say a
When you
very
want,
big thank you for speaking with us. We appreciate your time and the insights you've provided.
Thank you so much, Felicity, and always happy to chat with you. Thank you.